morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Well, by now, most of the cattle are up at the highest elevations of the summer range, and hopefully those calves are putting on close to 3 pounds a day. Cowboys are riding, checking, doctoring, and moving, and it's a pretty enjoyable job. The hard work of loading the stock trailers where they have to be hauled from the home ranch to the summer grazing is over now, and we can laugh looking back at some of the adventures that produced.
And when you sort calves from mamas, there's always a little stress, and it usually means your trailer floor will carry a liquid mess.
That's Terry Brown, and you'll love his offering in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight today. And early in the year, when the heifers were calving, there were some adventures, and Baxter Black will tell us about one couple's day.
They pushed a hungry calf in with Redneck, and she treated him like a toxic waste salesman.
On the Rangeland News, well, maybe the Canada-Mexico-U.S. trade agreement will happen, but...
What part of the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal now awaiting congressional approval, seems to concern lawmakers the most? Well,
we will find out. And the late Joe Beeler was a wonderful Western artist and a darn good cowboy. I had the pleasure of meeting and visiting with him a few years ago, and we'll bring back some of those memories today.
It was scary watching some of those old cows get after those guys on those things, and it was really scary.
Joe spent a lot of his time riding the rugged desert country of Arizona, and this great song from John Hargett celebrates something that doesn't happen too often.
There's a rumble across the valley, so loud it shakes the window panes. Thunder heads across the sky, rolling like an ocean's tide. It's an Arizona rain. Winds are twisting and a turning, dust is swirling up the lane. Now I'm pulling up a chair, watch the master clear the air. It's an Arizona rain. With every drop of moisture I see a brighter green, and all life here is depending on that Arizona rain. Cattle calling in the distance, huddled up beneath the trees. My old horse is standing there soaking wet, but he don't care. It's an Arizona rain. I can smell the rain for miles, sweeter than a breath of spring. Though the skies are dark and gray, it's gonna brighten up my day. It's an Arizona rain. And with every drop of moisture I see a brighter green, and all life here is dependent on that Arizona rain. I've got a pot of coffee boiling as lightning streaks across the range. Now I'm sitting in my chair, watch the master clear the air. It's an Arizona rain.
Well, that guy spent time opening shows for Don Williams when they toured across Western Canada quite a few years ago now. His name is John Hargett, and he also spent some time during that tour shoeing chuckwagon horses around southern Alberta. And sadly, he rode across the Great Divide a few years ago as well. Wonderful guy. Joe Beeler was a founding member of Cowboy Artists of America, and he rode across the Great Divide in April of 2006. Now, a few years before that, I had a wonderful time visiting with him when he came to Canada's Cowboy Festival at the Calgary Convention Center. And the first thing we talked about was those Arizona cowboys.
Down in our country, like you talk about the thick brush and the mesquite, the cowpunchers wear big, heavy, long leggings and usually, use a shorter rope and, the southern style saddle with the more swells on the saddle and your rope coiled up small because you're riding through brush and you don't have anything hanging behind. Usually a cowpuncher down there, you don't wear a long slicker because it'd get tore up riding through the brush and just little different things like that. And it's been fun as an artist to pick those things up and try to get them when you do different parts of the country to try to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And the rocks have got to be a different situation down there, too. I imagine even that can take its toll on horses sometimes, some of that real rocky terrain.
Arizona, that's why, I was asked here about cowboys using ATCs or some mechanical devices, and down there...
Who asked you that?
Well, there was somebody here who was talking about that, and I could see where in flatter country you could use that, or maybe up here probably a snowmobile would be handy, but our country's straight up and straight down in places, and it's just those horses learn to scramble around in those rocks, and one of the toughest things, like if a horse is brought, say, from Kansas or Oklahoma to Arizona, they've got to learn about, cactus and rocks, the things that they're not used to where they came from. And I'm sure you bring an Arizona horse up here and have to cross some of these creeks 2 or 3 times, you'd have to whip and spur to get them to jump off in some of these, or get in some of these boggy places that you have up here.
That can get a little scary, but I don't think there's anything scarier than these RVs and these four-wheelers.
No.
Trying to chase a cow on one of those doesn't work because they don't watch where that cow is going, and if you're watching the cow, they don't watch where they're going, and more guys I know that have tried it wound up running into a tree or something.
That's right, or turn them over. Well, I was on a ranch down there just south of Laramie last winter, and we worked buffalo. I've always been interested in seeing buffalo up close and using them in some paintings. And so I went down there, and this ranch had 1,200 head, and they used ATCs. It was kind of big open sage flats, and it was scary watching some of those old cows get after those guys on those things, and it was really scary. Both, if you're riding them and trying to get away, both is scary.
You'll hear about Joe Beeler's very definite ideas on Western art when The Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to The Spirit of the West. The art of Joe Beeler portrays the West as accurately, I think, as it can possibly be done. It has a realism and an authenticity that folks who know will instantly recognize.
Well, the thing about Western art, too, is in the beginning, now it's kind of got away from it a little bit now, but to me, Western art was like Charlie Russell did always. There was always a neat story in it. And a lot of the Western art today has kind of got away from that, but I still like the paintings that have a narrative to it, to where you can look and say, you can tell something's going to happen or something just did happen, and I think that was one of the wonderful qualities of Charlie Russell's work. And of course the cowboys love a story, like the poets and the storytellers and the songs, and they all they have a beginning and a middle and an end, and sometimes with the humor thrown in. I think that's wonderful.
Quite a few of your paintings, if I can recall, would fit that category, I think, with kind of a narrative to them.
Yeah, I've done that a lot, and sometimes you can do it in sculpture too, but it seems like Western art has got more today, with more artists. Of course, there's a lot of artists that are cowboy artists that really aren't cowboys, that really don't know that much about the subject, and they go out on a ranch and shoot some pictures and go back and just paint a pretty picture. But when you understand the subject, like there's a few guys that really do, why I think it's wonderful to see those kind of paintings where you can, like you've been there yourself, or you hope that it don't happen to you.
Yeah, right, but yeah, I know the feel and the understanding,
Yeah.
and most of us that kind of make our living horseback and do this kind of work, even though the picture in detail can be totally accurate, I think we can usually tell if that artist has really been there and lived it or not, because there's often there'll be something not quite right. Like a lot of times maybe they'll use a reverse negative and the rope will be on the left side of the saddle coiled up backwards. Well, you spot that right away, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And well, in the early days too of Western art, I grew up in Oklahoma and around, and the people that bought my paintings were cowboys and ranchers. And you had to have everything right because it was their business and to know. So, and nowadays a lot of the collectors are people that are outside the agriculture or ranching business. So, a lot of them, they don't know what a good horse is supposed to look like or care, as long as it's a pretty picture, and hopefully that that kind of art won't dictate too much about where Western art goes in the future.
A little later, you'll hear about Joe's adventures capturing wild cattle and horses in the Arizona desert. And that's what inspired Les Buffin and Mike Fleming to collaborate on this song that many folks say the best version was done by Butch Falk.
Say, Sam, do you remember a long time ago when we rode together where the Wyoming winds blow? High on a ridgetop, just you and me, and watched the wild horses running so free. When it was jerky and coffee, about half felt alike, and a biscuit or two that we downed on the fly. That old Mustang fever sure ran in our veins, and it seemed like the devil was holding the reins. Now I'm chasing old memories, though trails have grown dim, through the cedars and pinions below the Kinney Rim. When it was just you and me and them Mustangs there in the blue shadows below the old Kinney Rim. We'd rope them old broomies and hobble fast, then back on the trail until the very last. When daylight had faded, we'd bed on the ground, then up before daybreak and go one more round. Now, Sam, them old ponies, they're just about gone. There's a few left like us, they're still holding on. And one of these days, well, they'll catch the last ones, and I reckon by then we'll have finished our run. Now I'm chasing old memories, though trails have grown dim, through the cedars and pinions below the Kinney Rim. When it was just you and me and them Mustangs there in the blue shadows below the old Kinney Rim. Now I'm chasing old memories, though trails have grown dim, through the cedars and pinions below the Kinney Rim. When it was just you and me and them Mustangs there in the blue shadow below the old Kinney Rim.
A great arrangement, overseen by Ben Crane and Sharky's dobro, and of course Butch's fine acoustic lead guitar on Below the Kinney Rim. Well, Joe Beeler did not paint from photographs. His work was from first-hand observations.
Well, no, you know, what I do is I usually don't work from any photographs or models either, and I just, it's like this painting here we're kind of standing in front of. I was down in Montana this spring and worked a bunch of us with on Wally McRae's ranch, and I came home and painted this big painting of one morning there where he's kind of scattering the riders, where we went off in pairs and kind of started gathering the country. And what I do is I just try to remember, you know, how it looked and what it looked like, and what everybody, kind of the color of horses and
Is Wally in the picture there?
yeah, that's Wally kind of pointing off.
Right,
You know,
right,
and old Les Best is there. And,
On the bay horse.
Ian Tyson comes down there with us, and Chuck Storms and Chuck Weldon from down at Billings, and Don Hedgepeth, and there's about 10 or 12 of us get together every spring and go punch cows somewhere. And we were down there last spring. We roped and branded 900 calves down there and drug them all to the farm. We had a crew of this, about 20, probably 25 of us. You know.
Yeah.
But we had a big time down there.
Can you be sort of elitist enough that you can just ride heel and drag calves, or do you have to get off and do the groundwork?
No, I tell you what, Wally had some big old stout kids there. Some kids on the wrestling team did all the work on the ground, did the flanking and everything. But some of us with a little gray underneath over our ears there got to do the roping, and I do like to rope, and we did get them.
Do you haul your own horse way up there?
Old George Holt over at Dillon has got a mare, a real nice mare that I rode a couple of years. But I did buy a big roan horse up there last year from a guy named Cecil Noyes. I'd seen the horse the year before, and he's a 5-year-old big roan horse, and I bought him and hauled him home, and I'll probably haul him back up there next spring.
There will be more from this memorable visit in a little while, and Baxter Black is next with a story of how calving heifers went for one ranching couple when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after this with a little peek at Bob and Dixie's cowtail.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you, to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
It was a warm, wet spring in the Cypress Hills of southern Saskatchewan. The ice on Battle Creek turned punk, and Bob and Dixie's calvy heifers were suffering from foot rot. Thursday morning, Bob found heifer number 210 looking tough. She was lame and showed signs of a recent calving, but no calf was in sight. Probably slunk her, or the coyotes got it, thought Bob. Well, that afternoon, using their version of team roping, a header and a hauler, Bob and Dixie roped number 210 and hauled her to the barn in the loader. She looked pitiful, with her head lolling out of the bucket like a wilted flower. Next morning's check, Bob found a ringy redneck first calf heifer, ignoring her new calf, who was bawling in the rose brush near where they'd picked up old 210. He caught the calf, brought him to the barn, and gave him a bottle of milk replacer, and then he and Dixie, the header and the hauler, brought old Redneck in for some mother-baby bonding. She fought it all the way. Finally, Dixie hooked up the feed wagon and enticed the reluctant Redneck back to the corral. As soon as the heifer realized where she was, she charged the gate, broke it down, and escaped. Bob grabbed his rope and built to her like a Canadian finals calf roper. He hog-tied her, and then Dixie scooped her up in the loader bucket and then dumped her back at the corral where they penned her up. They pushed the hungry calf in with Redneck, and she treated him like a toxic waste salesman. "Oh, I'll leave him for a while," said Bob without much confidence. Dixie looked in on number 210, who was perking up, and then these two dedicated cow people stepped outside and took her breather. 10 minutes later, Bob peeked in on the Redneck. She backed into the corner and tried to climb the wall. The calf was gone. "You stupid, cud-chewing, sorry excuse for a large herbivore." His reprimand was interrupted by Dixie. "Come look at this," she hollered. She was leaning over number 210's pen. There was the calf, head under Mama's flank, tail spinning like a propeller. The heifer stood placid. He had crawled out of Redneck's pen, come down the alley, crawled through a cross gate, and then into his mama's pen. "Well, I'll be darned," said Bob, not the least bit embarrassed that he'd paired him up wrong. "Let's go to the house and get a cup of coffee." "Well, if you don't mind," she said, "I'm going to have a gin and tonic." This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by Corteva Agri-Science.
The contribution made by the many people who came from Ireland to the North American West was immeasurable. So many of our great Western music classics have their roots in the Emerald Isle. And I love reading about the history of that part of the world. Really looking forward to seeing Ireland firsthand on our 17th annual Spirit of the West cruise at the end of August. A lot of young cowboys who rode on the early trail drives can trace their roots back to there. And this Red Steagall song is called If I Never See Ireland Again.
Molly stood crying, her tears falling down like a storm on the cold Irish sea. She said, "My darling boy, are you just bound to go? Don't you care for your mother and me?" I said, "Molly, you know you're the love of my life, and I've no plans to leave you behind. But I'm America bound, when my fortune is found, I'll send for you both in good time. If I never see Ireland again, I still have the love of my family and friends to carry me safe to that faraway shore, where I'll have a new life to begin. If I never see Ireland again." With a handful of soil from my daddy's cold grave and a bag that holds all that I own, I trust that the Lord, the wind and the waves will guide me toward a new home. And the posters all say that the West is a way to the land where my soul longs to be, where the sky never ends and the big rivers bend and the country is wild and it's free. If I never see Ireland again, I'll still have the love of my family and friends to carry me safe to that faraway shore, where I'll have a new life to begin. If I never see Ireland again. Colin's letter said, "Lad, I know you're new wed, but come join me, I'll be heading west. A new world to be found, and it's glorious ground for a man who can just pass the test. If I never see Ireland again, I'll still have the love of my family and friends to carry me safe to that faraway shore, where I'll have a new life to begin. If I never see Ireland again, if I never see Ireland again, I still have the love of my family and friends to carry me safe to that faraway shore, where I'll have a new life to begin. If I never see Ireland again."
Now the news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
At the top of page 1, it says things seem to be rolling along with the new NAFTA, the new Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, but apparently there are some concerns in the U.S. Gary Crawford has the story.
What part of the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal now awaiting congressional approval, seems to concern lawmakers the most? Well, at a Senate Finance Committee hearing this week, the main issue mentioned there:
enforcement.
Real enforcement.
Enforcement.
Meaningful enforcement.
Stronger enforcement.
Enforcement, that seems to be the major issue for lawmakers. U.S. Chief Negotiator Ambassador Robert Lighthizer told the panel that not only are there dispute settlement mechanisms in the agreement,
but also what we did in this agreement, which I think
think is far more helpful is we made the obligations very, very specific. The more general the obligations are, the harder they are really to enforce. So we were far more specific than a lot of these agreements in the past so that we can precisely say whether or not someone is following it.
Lighthizer also said he's willing to work with lawmakers to further ramp up some of the enforcement and dispute settlement provisions in the deal. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
The latest restaurant chain to say no to fake meat is Taco Bell. That announcement comes after the taco chain, with 7,072 locations, met with representatives of both Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. Shares of Beyond Meat fell 2% on Wall Street last week on the news from Taco Bell, and Arby's also said it would not offer plant-based options on its menu. Earlier this year, Taco Bell said it would begin testing a vegetarian menu, and since then, some of its competitors have added plant-based ground beef imitations to their menu. Montana ranchers lost more than 37,000 cattle due to weather-related causes in 2018, according to data released by the Farm Service Agency. The Billings Gazette reported the Federal Livestock Indemnity Program paid out $11.1 million for the loss of 37,352 cattle in Montana in 2018. Ranchers and the Farm Service Agency say there were more weather-related cattle deaths that didn't qualify for compensation. A new study from researchers at the Children's Hospital Oakland Research Institute suggested that people who consume diets heavy on the chicken and turkey end up with cholesterol levels that are no different from people who consume diets featuring beef or pork. One of the most interesting beef demand trends over the last few years has been the growth in demand for brisket. New craft barbecue joints are popping up everywhere in Texas, but even the big chains like Arby's are jumping in and serving brisket. Now, briskets used to be a rather inexpensive beef cut that benefited from a long, slow cooking at low temperatures, and if it was seasoned properly and cooked slowly, oh man, it could be delicious. But they're no longer inexpensive. What used to be a very cheap cut, the primal brisket, is now only behind the prime rib and loin in value. Well, the next regular cattle sale at the BC Livestock Co-op in Kamloops is July 16th and July the 18th at the Williams Lake Yards, and in Vanderhoof the next sale will be July the 19th. You can get all the information at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, at the Innisfail Auction Market, regular cattle sales every Wednesday, and the next horse sale is July the 25th, and that's a Thursday. For more information, give them a call at 1-800-710-3166. And speaking of Innisfail, this old wandering cowboy and his guitar and the amazing Western Spirit Band will be on stage for the 43rd annual Ivan Daines Country Music Picnic at the Daines Ranch, Innisfail, Alberta. Picnic runs from August the 8th to the 11th, and among the great entertainers there will be Tim Huss and many, many more. I think tickets, they are. They're available now at the Black Knight Inn, and of course there's free camping on the grounds with a weekend pass. And for more information, you can call Ivan at 403-358-2295. And then the next weekend we'll be at the Stony Plain Cowboy Gathering, August 16th to the 18th, along with folks like Doris Daly, Ben Crane, Ryan Fritz, Ed Peekycoot, and many more. And there'll be quite a few of us playing river song guitars there. Get all the schedule and information stuff at stonyplaincowboygathering.com or call them at 780-718-5379. And now I guess we're ready for the final item. And I usually only say things like this to Billy when I see this kind of stuff, but I guess as I morph into a cranky old cowboy, I continue to say, I think this epidemic of stupid has taken us over. For example, a friend of ours' daughter went to a Mexican fast food restaurant and ordered a taco, and she asked the person behind the counter for minimal lettuce on the taco. And he said he was sorry. All they had was iceberg lettuce. And I was at the airport checking in at the gate a while ago when an airport employee says, "Has anyone put anything in your baggage without your knowledge?" And I said, "Well, if it was without my knowledge, how would I know? Anyway, it just goes on and on. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up in the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, a listener has a horse that lives in a box stall, and he's never been ridden outside of an arena. Now, the guy wants to take him out to a friend's ranch and do some cattle work out in the open. How can he get his horse ready for that? That's next when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. How do you prepare a horse for doing cattle work on a ranch when the horse has never been ridden outside? That's what we'll look at on the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear horse training file. But first, have a listen to this. As we get older, I think that sometimes we realize we've been so busy keeping things going that we haven't taken the time to see some of the amazing places we've read or heard about. And say booking a trip to Europe on your own can be pretty intimidating. Now, the great thing about going to places you've never been to before with the Spirit of the West group is that we all have so much in common, and all the organizing is done. And Jim and Karen, along with our support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan, do an amazing job to make the entire experience one you'll never forget. Our group flies to Dublin, Ireland on the 29th of August, and we'll have a city tour and a day in a beautiful Dublin hotel, plus a visit to the Irish National Stud Farm to see those amazing Irish thoroughbreds and how they're raised. Then we'll be hosted by the Irish Cattlemen's Federation. We'll tour Belfast and then sail over to Glasgow and Inverness, Scotland. And then on to France, England, and back to Dublin aboard the beautiful cruise ship, the Crown Princess. And we have all of those great on-board concerts and sing-alongs and so much more. And we still might have room for you. The phone number to call to find out, 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
At Irvin Tack and Western Wear, you won't find this.
Boots? Of course y'all need new boots. Yours are a tragedy, a travesty. Hey, don't go. I'm not done making fun yet.
But you will find this.
Welcome to Irvin's Boot Ranch. We have a huge selection. Check these out.
The brand new Boot Ranch at Irvin's is now open, so saddle up and see for yourself. Exit 305 on Highway 2 by Crossfield, open 7 days a week.
Canada's largest Western store.
And of course, you can shop from anywhere at irvinsaddles.ca. So this guy says, I'd like to start working cattle with my new horse. He was raised in a box stall, and he hasn't been ridden outside much. I'm sure he's never seen a cow. What should I be concerned about when I introduce cow work to him? Well, I think some horses take to cow work pretty well naturally, but even if they have a lot of cow horse breeding in their pedigree, they can still be afraid of cattle for a while. And I think the safest environment to introduce them to is in an arena with some pretty quiet cows. I would wait until I see the horse's curiosity overcoming his fear. And then I'd just ride towards the cows, but make sure he's curious and confident. And what might help is another rider on a comfortable, confident, well-seasoned cow horse riding with me. Now, the thing this horse needs to learn is that a cow will give ground when he advances into her flight zone. Once he understands that, depending on the horse and the cattle, I'd try just moving a couple of steps. What to watch out for? If the cows all take off on the run, some colts will be scared. If they just amble away and the horse understands that he's hurting them, that'll develop his confidence pretty quickly. But I'd say it's important to keep it at a slow, quiet pace as possible and try to stop when he still wants to do more. Now, if you can then move to a somewhat bigger pen outside, preferably with the same group of cows, he'll usually take to it just like he did in the arena. What to watch out for? Dogs running into the pen, spooking the cows. And with a bigger arena, when the cows might move quite a bit faster for a while. Next, would maybe step out in the pasture, out on the trail or in the hills where some of the most satisfying and enjoyable cow work can take place. What to watch out for? If you gather a good-sized group of cows and calves and say you're heading them down a trail with quite a bit of bush and hiding places around, the chances are a cow and a calf could easily be left behind. And it's all peaceful and romantic riding along behind the herd, as it says in the song, while the stock is softly stringing, Clancy rides behind them singing, 'cause the drover's life is pleasures that the townsfolk never know. And then, suddenly, several cows and calves come running up the trail behind you, and that can really spook even a seasoned cow horse for a few seconds. So I would say try and kind of think like the cows and think like a good cow horse, and when it's working, there's nothing better. And for Irvin Saddles and Western Wear, that's the Horse Training File. Something else that helps our horses every day is that feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. Find out all about it at hoffmanshorseration.com. There's more from that visit with the much-loved Western artist Joe Beeler coming up, right after a song that comes from a guy that sure is the real deal. Ed Brown is a gifted, award-winning carver, sculptor, and a great songwriter, singer, and poet, and a darn good cowboy, too. He'll be at the Stony Plain Cowboy Gathering August 16th to the 18th. This is a horse called Lonesome.
He rides a horse called Lonesome and leads one called Days Gone By. He doesn't quite know just how to let go, so he rides beneath a dark, cloudy sky. A future more bright was the promise, but he's been thinking that somebody lied. He didn't need the change, he liked riding the range, but today he's got no place to hide. This land was once home to the cowboy, and under its skies he did roam. There were plenty of uses for humpback cayuses, and plenty of loops to be thrown, with a campfire consuming the darkness, and a bed right there by its side. His diamonds were hitches, his friends were his riches, but today he's got no place to hide. Now you don't see much of the chuck wagon or of the old hula hand. Diamonds are things found in fancy gold rings, and it's hard to know just where you stand. The highways and fences now travel where the old buckaroo used to ride. Plans have been laid and the price has been paid, and the real cowboy's got no place to hide. He rides a horse called Lonesome, 'cause today he's got no place to hide.
Joe Beeler was loved and respected as an artist and a cowboy, and I was really glad I had a chance to meet him before he rode across the Great Divide. Now, one of the things we talked about was what can go wrong in the branding pen.
Sometimes a healer will head rope a calf and bring him out there, and then he'll start windmilling around on 4 feet. That gets a little wet.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and just kind of, knock everybody down and rim fire everybody.
Yeah.
And a lot of those big outfits down there, the guys are good ropers, good bronc riders. You know, they usually have a string of horses, they're green horses, and there's some really good cowpunchers in that central Arizona region. You know, 100-mile circle of Prescott there. Because of one of the things, there's so many wild cattle. There's a lot of wild cattle in that part of the country, which makes cowboys, they got to be able to do about anything there is to do a horseback. You know?
Most of our cattle, if they do get turned out for, for one summer, if they don't get picked up in the gather in the fall, they won't survive the winter. It's be one heck of a challenge when you come on a bunch of them to try and get them.
Well, there's cattle down there, you know, they could be 10 or 12 years old and never seen a man before. There's a lot of country down there like that, and there's guys down there make a living that go around and have a little crew that just gather maverick cattle, and will just go into a place and just gather the wild cattle or the maverick cattle off of it. And they're usually all roped and tied down, you know, tied to a tree and then led out.
Yeah. Just thinking, there's got to be an awful lot of satisfaction in capturing one of those old gals that are big old steers that's been running out there and nobody's been able to catch them, and you finally get a loop on them. That's got to be, must be quite a feeling.
What you do, you carry 2 or 3 head ropes on behind your, you know, the cantle of your saddle, and to tie those cattle up with, and then like, you know, 5 or 6 piggin strings, you know, hanging down, you know, your belt from your chaps, and it really is.
There was a horse that excelled at capturing those wild cattle in the Arizona desert. His name was Sancho, and R.W. Hampton owned him and wrote this song about him. I love doing this one, even though it is kind of emotional. In the Arizona desert where the tall saguaros grow, purple Bradshaw Mountains rise and the Aulafria flows. Down in a lonesome sand wash where no man should ever go, a buzzard picks the sun-bleached bones of the horse that I call Sancho. Sancho was a good horse, best one I've ever owned. His blood was hot as the desert sun, stout of heart and bone. A rangy, long blood-colored bay, he was only 4 past old. The day I drug my saddle from the horse that I call Sancho, we were rounding up the slick ones and our work was almost done, when I jumped another maverick bunch for one last downhill run. I should have known he'd had enough, but I just had to go and catch another wild cow brood on the horse that I call Sancho. Down a rough and a rocky mountainside for 2 and 1 mile more, had to beat and cut 'em off down to the desert floor, through the boulders and the cholla to the sandy wash below. Work no thing as quit or stop in the horse that I call Sancho. We closed the gap on a brindle cow of maybe 2 or 3, jerked her down and I tied her up to a Palo Verde tree. Then I loosened off the cinches so my old part could blow, but breath came short from the mighty lungs of the horse that I call Sancho. Then all at once he faltered, his knees began to go. So big of heart and stout of will, he never let me know I'd given him a job to do, a job that he loved so. As the sun set in the west, so did the heart of Sancho. Down in the darkened desert where no man could ever see, the tears I cried for an honest horse who gave his all for me. If heaven's got a home for him, I know that's where he'll be. Standing saddled ready in the home that waits for me. In the Arizona desert where the tall saguaros grow, the purple Bradshaw Mountains rise, the Agua Fria flows. Down in a lonesome sand wash where no man should ever go, a buzzard picks the sun-bleached bones of the horse that I call Sancho. A buzzard picks the sun-bleached bones of the horse that I call Sancho. That's from our Creak of the Leather CD, and it's been sold out for a long time, but we finally got it reissued. And you can order copies now by email or from our website, hugh-mclennan.com. And, of course, we'll have them available when we're doing live shows as well. Coming up, a classic Song of the West I think you're really going to like, and then the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Saw a YouTube clip of the Elko Cowboy Gathering from a few years back, and Don Edwards was singing this song written by Marty Robbins with some help from Bob Nolan, and it's our classic Song of the West for this week, Man Walks Among Us.
Warm are the winds on the desert, a whirlwind is dancing around. I stop to survey all the beauty that's here when a shadow moves out across the ground. It's an eagle that circles above me, and he screams to his friends on the hill, stay close together, move not a feather. Man walks among us, be still, be still. Man walks among us, be still. Everything hides, but I see them. I've spotted an old mother quail. I look close and see God looking at me through the eyes of a young cottontail. I see a coyote sneaking as he crawls through the brush on the hill, and the eagle screams down, stay close to the ground. Man walks among us, be still, be still. Man walks among us, be still. 20 feet high in the side of a cactus, I see a hole where the butcher bird stays. If mortals could choose, if heaven should ask us, here's where I'd want to spend all of my days. Soon will be gone all the desert, cities will cover each hill. Today will just be a fond memory. Man walks among us, be still, be still. Man walks among us, be still.
And now, in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, Terry Nash.
It had been a busy morning, just one of them gathering days. We were loading several trailers shipping pairs to summer graze. Since I'd got there first, my rig was first to catch a load. I had 10 cows a trailer soon, parked alongside the road. I'd stayed put there after loading, helping with the final counting. Then 10 rigs left together, moving up toward the mountain. And when you sort calves from mamas, there's always a little stress, and it usually means your trailer floor will carry a liquid mess. For once that tailgate closes, one thing that's for sure, 10 nervous cows will raise their tails and deposit some manure. Now, a tailgate ain't watertight, and so it stands to reason if you're on the road in cattle country, you'll see proof. It's shipping season. Well, the red light stopped the traffic. Then the green one let us go, and I'm building up momentum, but still moving kind of slow when I eyes this motorcycle pushing close behind my rig. He's decked out all in black and looking pretty big. And even though I'm gaining speed, this feller's acting tough, and in his mind, I expect I wasn't moving fast enough. Now, concerned, I tried to warn him as he's staring in my mirror about this big mistake he's making, pushing too close to my rear. Well, actually, what I did was whisper, "Buddy, this ain't going to turn out well." He's pushing hard now in my mirror behind my left-hand wheel well. He clearly had visions of passing, but there's traffic the other way. And even though I'm gassing, my slow rig is messing up his day. Well, I've gained highway speed by now, and then he disappears from left-hand view. A glance to the right finds him pulling over with a job to do. He'd stopped on the shoulder, plumb give up on the race, had his do-rag off his head and was wiping off his face. The moral: don't let your vision rule and your temper become stirred, as you might soon realize that your vision's getting blurred.
Well, thanks so much for riding along this week, and I sure hope you can join us back here next week at the same time. As always, thanks to Mark and Kathy McMillan, the Spirit of the West support crew. And remember, if you need tractor parts, any make, any year, just see Mark's page, bctractorparts.com. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.